Yeah.
Do you want to do that as chair?
Is it appropriate for me to move it as chair? I don't mind.
I moved the last one.
So we'll do that right at the beginning? Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of September 23rd. I believe all members of the committee are here except Councillor Palashi, who's away on municipal business, and Councillor Willens, who I believe is on personal leave, vacation. My apologies. So members of committee, there are a few agenda changes, and I'll hand it over to our city clerk to go through them.
Mr. Chair, members of committee, and members of the public watching today's meeting, these are the changes to today's agenda. There are delegations regarding the Active Transportation Master Plan. There will be a staff presentation first, which is item 6.1, followed by the delegations 5.2, and then consideration of the staff report 7.1. In regards to the Active Transportation Master Plan, I mentioned 7.1, there will be delegations related to that item. In regards to item 7.3 on today's agenda, city-initiated official plan and zoning bylaw amendments to implement the Bramley Mobility Hub land use study. There are appendices that were omitted when the agenda was published that are now published online, and as well there is an added correspondence identified on today's agenda as 13.1. So as this item is listed on consent, the proposal would be that when we get to consent, that perhaps this item be removed from consent for consideration with the correspondence. We also have, continue on to the agenda. We can go to item 13.1 is the correspondence I referenced in regards to item 7.3. As well, there is correspondence, item 13.2 on today's agenda regarding the city-initiated official plan amendment to introduce new tertiary plan policies across the city. And that relates to staff report item 7.5, which also is on consent on today's agenda, and at the appropriate time during the consent motion should be removed from consent for consideration along with this correspondence. And Mr. Chair, those are the changes that the clerk's office is aware of at this time.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Members of the committee, are there any further changes or no? Can I get a motion to move, or I believe I'd like to, City Clerk, move deferral of the item regarding the Queen Street tertiary plan, as I believe that there's still negotiations going on, so I'd like to move it on to next planning meeting.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the motion then would be to defer items 11.1, which are the 4 delegations as shown on the screen, and as well 11.2, which is the staff report on the Queen Street West Tertiary Plan, to defer those matters to the October 7th Planning and Development Committee.
Yes, thank you. Can I get a mover to move the changes? Moved by Councilor Fortini. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest on the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? No. Consent agenda. We have right now 4 items in consent. Okay, can I get a move, Councillor Bowman?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just, on the clerk's advice, we should remove 7.3 so that we can add in the correspondence, and the same thing with 7.5, so we can add in 13.2, the correspondence.
Okay, thank you. So I need a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting, moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? Carried. We have no statutory public meetings. Our first item is delegation, and this is item 5.1 regarding a permission to apply for amendment to the Brampton Flowertown secondary plan to permit the development of townhouses. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Councillor Fortini. Oh, so okay. Okay, so you'd like to move the heritage minutes into consent? Okay. Okay, so again, moved by Counselor Bowman. All in favor? Thank you. So now we go to item 5.1. Mr. William Outred.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Members.
Thank you.
Just here for a short delegation with respect to item number 7.2, pertaining to our request for an exemption from section 22.211 of the Planning Act to facilitate making an application to amend the secondary plan. This is Area 6, Brampton Flowertown. The purpose is basically for the exemption to allow us to proceed through with an application to develop 50 back-to-back townhomes and 5 street townhomes, and intended to be for condominium. As you know, there is a restriction as far as making applications because of the secondary plan policy right now for up to a 2-year period. Our client is going through due diligence. He wants to know that he can proceed with an application. If he can't proceed with an application for 2 years, then it may be possible that he may not be going through it. Maybe I can just describe what the application is very briefly. As I said, it is an application for 6 properties. It's 55, 59, and 61 Beach Street, 136, 140, and 142 Church Street East. It's a land assembly of 0.9 hectares in total. The intention is to build 55 units, condominium units, density approximately 60 units per net residential hectare. 4 of the 6 lots contain dwellings that are listed on the Heritage Registrar. We've already met with Heritage. There's a decision still to be made if 2 of those homes are going to be kept. It's still in discussion purposes. The official plan designation of the properties is residential, which does permit a broad range of housing types and densities. The Brampton Flowertown secondary plan area is designated as low-density residential. The low-density residential designation does permit for singles, semis, to a maximum density of 30 units per net residential hectare. Therefore, the application to amend the Flowertown secondary plan will be required as part of our application to deal with the rezoning when we go forward with it. Since the Brampton Flowertown secondary plan was adopted on September 12th of 2018, an exemption from council, once again, is the requirement to allow a developer to submit an application to amend the secondary plan. We believe the exemption in this case is warranted because the subject properties are located near the central area and are approximately 2 blocks north of Queen Street East, which is designated as a primary intensification corridor. Furthermore, the intersection of Queen Street East and Center Street has been planned as a major transit station area. The city's official plan directs significant growth and intensification to the central area and to the major transit station areas, and intensification corridors are to provide opportunities for intensive transportation and transit uses. Given the location of these properties close to the central area, the primary intensification corridor, and of course the planned major transit station area, a higher density townhome development is an appropriate use of lands in our opinion. In addition, the development will serve to support higher order transit when it is built. For these reasons, we respectfully request that council provide an exemption to allow us to proceed through and file an application for a secondary plan amendment.
Thank you very much. Councilor Vicente, I see you're on the board. Is it regarding the delegation? Would you like that to bring up the report 7.2?
Oh, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Outward, thank you so much for coming here today to explain to us what it is that you're looking to do. Be happy to move item 7.2 and move for receipt of the delegation, and we look forward to having the conversations with staff and with you as to what will happen on this parcel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vicente. So members of committee, Councilor Vicente has brought for us our consideration item 7.2. Are there any questions or comments? No. So Councilor Vicente has moved report 7.2. All in favor? Carried, and also the delegation as well. Thank you. Now we go on to our highly anticipated item regarding active transportation master plan. I believe we have 4 delegations. I'd like to invite Dr. Jessica Hopkins. that's normal, that's fine. So I'd invite staff presentation first.
Good afternoon, committee chair, members of council, leadership team, and Brampton residents. We are excited to be here today to present the city's first active transportation master plan. The master plan, or the ATMP, provides us with a framework to achieve a connected cycling and pedestrian network across the city and encourage cycling for both recreation and everyday purposes. This work builds on the 2002 Pathways Master Plan and is a recommendation from the 2015 Transportation Master Plan Update, which provided us with a proposed active transportation network, which we validated through this process. The ATMP is consistent with Brampton's 2040 vision, which states that in 2040, Brampton will be a mosaic of a safe, integrated transportation choices and new modes, contributing to civic sustainability and emphasizing walking, cycling, and transit. It's also important to note that we're not starting from ground zero. Our existing cycling network includes 470 kilometers of bike lanes, trails, and paths, 110 of which were built in the last 6 years. We've also built valuable partnerships with community groups such as the Cycling Advisory Committee and Bike Brampton, who have had an amazing success delivering organized rides, cycling mentorship programs, bike repair programs all throughout our community. In 2017, Brampton received the Bicycle-Friendly Community Bronze designation from Share the Road Cycling Coalition. So building on this momentum, we retained the services IBI group to assist us with the development of a strategic direction, meeting a goal of building a safe, attractive, and connected cycling and pedestrian network. So with that, I'd like to introduce Zebby Petch, Norma Moores from IBI Group to provide you with an overview of what's included within the Active Transportation Plan. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As Nelson introduced, my name is Zibby Petch. I'm an active transportation planner and engineer with IBI Group, and I'm very happy to be here with you this afternoon to speak about the Active Transportation Master Plan. Active transportation refers to the movement of people using non-motorized modes such as walking, cycling, and travel with the use of mobility aids. Accordingly, the vision of the Active Transportation Master Plan is to create a livable city where residents can safely and conveniently access places, goods, services, and connect to transit by developing an integrated, attractive, and accessible system of walking and cycling facilities. As Brampton grows, the city will continually need to address the challenges of managing increasing travel demand and automobile congestion and finding better ways to move people and goods. Active transportation can help to address these challenges and offers a variety of key benefits. Recreational and health benefits, allowing people to integrate activity into their daily commutes. Economic benefits, such as improving the health of residents, resulting in lower healthcare costs and increased productivity. Transportation benefits, reducing demand on the existing auto and transit networks. And environmental benefits, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions, critical to consider in light of Canada and the City of Brampton's recently declared climate emergencies. An iterative process was followed throughout this study, focusing on reviewing background documents, evaluating demand for infrastructure, reviewing network feasibility and phasing, and identifying supporting programs and policies, along with public and stakeholder consultation. The multifaceted consultation effort for the plan included internal city meetings, coordinating meetings with the region of Peel, presentations to the city's Cycling Advisory Committee, 2 public information centers, and an online digital consultation program, as well as a large-scale visioning exercise as part of the 2040 Vision Workshop. There is policy support for active transportation at numerous levels of government, including federal, provincial, and regional bodies. Several key policy and implementation documents at these varying agencies are shown here, including the provincial Cycle-On Strategy and Action Plans and the region's Sustainable Transportation Strategy. There is also significant policy support for active transportation at the local level. key City of Brampton policy documents identify support for active transportation, including the Brampton 2040 vision, with several actions related to active mobility and complete streets. The plan is structured around the 4 key themes shown here: designing infrastructure for safety and comfort, connecting networks, providing year-round mobility, and developing a walking and cycling culture. These themes form the cornerstones of the plan recommendations. First, we'll focus on designing for safety and comfort. This theme recognizes and highlights the importance of high-quality, safe, and comfortable infrastructure. Without high-quality, connected facilities, increases in walking and cycling mode share will be difficult to achieve. A variety of design guidance for practitioners has also been developed and included in a supplementary design compendium. The plan and design compendium recognize the importance of providing a high-quality pedestrian realm, meeting or exceeding minimum widths for all aspects of a pedestrian zone, as well as ensuring City of Brampton pathways and sidewalks meet or exceed AODA requirements. The plan also focuses on selecting and providing cycling facilities appropriate for the roadway context that will be attractive to all residents and reflect guidance in Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18. Even at intersections and crossings, the plan reflects the mobility hierarchy laid out in Brampton 2040 vision: first walking, then cycling, transit, goods movement, and then finally shared and private vehicles. To support this vision, a wide variety of intersection treatments are currently in use and planned for future applications to improve conditions for pedestrians and cyclists. Next, we'll discuss connecting the network. A connected network that is attractive and easy to use is at the heart of the Active Transportation Master Plan, focusing on both new facilities, the proposed network, as well as upgrades to the existing network. This slide illustrates the various programs included in the plan, addressing sidewalk gaps, cycling and trails infrastructure to be added both through the Capital Roads Program and through an infill construction program, various fix-it programs identified for different types of existing facilities, and finally the priority network and supporting network amenities. This map illustrates the ultimate vision for the cycling and trails network, including over 500 kilometers of new infrastructure. The network is made up of a variety of facility types, including recreational trails, multi-use paths, cycle tracks, and protected bike lanes along busier roads, bike lanes or buffered bike lanes along collectors, and shared roadways along local roads. As part of the plan, a priority cycling network has been identified. These are intended to be the highest priority links from the ultimate network vision to create a core, comfortable, citywide network made up of the loop, a north-south route, and east-west connections. This network is intended to be made up of higher-order cycling facilities, such as recreational trails, multi-use paths, cycle tracks, buffered and protected bike lanes, and is consistent with the Big Ask. Next, we'll discuss the need for year-round mobility. Proper maintenance is critical to ensuring that walking and cycling infrastructure is safe, comfortable, and usable throughout the year. A good maintenance regimen can help to encourage walking or ride trips in all seasons, reduce the risk of injuries, and extend the service life of infrastructure. The plan explores possible changes to maintenance service levels along priority walking and cycling corridors, but recognizing the scope of funding and equipment implications, suggests exploring these service levels and networks further in collaboration with the Road Operations Division. Any improvements to maintenance will be phased over time and subject to council approval. While further work is needed to confirm the priority maintenance network, it is intended to draw heavily on the minimum grid priority cycling and trails network. Finally, we'll discuss developing a walking and cycling culture. While building the active transportation network is a key ingredient in making walking and biking a viable transportation option, it also has to be coupled with supportive policies and programs that will foster a walking and cycling culture in Brampton. A list of 36 programming initiatives are identified in the Active Transportation Master Plan, including a mix of existing and new programs focused on encouragement, education, and enforcement. Sample program types include school travel planning and active and safe routes to school programs, public outreach and engagement, including events like Bike the Creek, Bike Month, and the development of a bike ambassador engagement team, and education and enforcement programs such as partnerships with Peel Regional Police. Policy also plays an integral role in ensuring that land use and transportation planning work together to create places more supportive of active transportation. Various policies are recommended for consideration in the city's official plan and transportation master plan, including encouraging and promoting active transportation as a preferred mode of transportation, incorporating considerations for active transportation into the land use planning process, and ensuring performance monitoring. So how will the plan be implemented? The implementation strategy draws on the technical work and recommends key steps and actions to achieve the plan goals and objectives focused on the short-term 5-year horizon. Performance monitoring and ongoing tracking is an important part of any plan. Various targets and objectives have been identified based on the plan. These targets will help the city evaluate the effectiveness of various recommendations. An overview of high-level annual cost estimates for the different infrastructure programs is shown here. For the Sidewalk Gaps program, there are about 95 kilometers of existing missing sidewalks. For the funding for the construction of sidewalk gaps has varied annually, so dedicated annual funding of about $1.25 million will help accelerate the sidewalk gap program. The cost to deliver the short-term 5-year infill trails and cycling project is estimated at just over $19 million, or about $4 million annually. The Fix-It programs are estimated to cost about $12.5 million, so the annual cost to deliver these improvements over a 10-year horizon is about $1.25 million on an annual basis. This means targeting an investment of about $6.5 million on an annual basis over the short-term horizon, noting that these costs will vary on an annual basis as some projects progress through multiple years of planning, design, and finally construction. From a variety of sources, just under $5 million is available for this initiative in the 2020 capital budget, representing about 7% of the total $94.3 million roads capital program. The plan is intended to be a living document, evolving as infrastructure changes occur. It is intended that the short-term projects in this plan proceed over the 5-year period, subject to capital budget approval, and the network and recommendations are updated every 5 years, consistent with the Transportation Master Plan. It's also important to note that the city is currently preparing Complete Streets guidelines, which will provide support for pedestrian and cycling infrastructure implementation for the capital program. Thank you very much, and with that, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, I see there are some names on the board. I would ask that we go first through our delegations, and if you can hold your questions. Our first delegation is from Dr. Jessica Hopkins from the Region of Peel Public Health.
I'll just wait a moment. I have a presentation. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to delegate in support of Brampton's Active Transportation Master Plan. This really provides an opportunity to promote the health of Brampton residents. The plan identifies key walking and cycling infrastructure investments, programs, and policies to increase mobility options for residents in Brampton. This plan aligns with Peel Public Health's efforts to support healthy built environments and the development of complete communities that are safe, age-friendly, and accessible. Transportation infrastructure that provides opportunities to build physical activity back into people's everyday lives can help to address major population health level issues in Peel, such as physical inactivity. Physical inactivity is a significant public health issue not only in Brampton, but across all of Canada. Only 15% of adults and 7% of children in Canada meet minimum requirements for daily physical activity. That means if you look around the room, most of us here are not meeting those minimum requirements. To address this significant issue, we must act locally to build opportunities for physical activity into the daily lives of Brampton residents. Education alone is not going to reverse these trends. Citizens are largely working against an environment where sedentary behavior is the default. For many Peel residents, the vast majority of their day is spent commuting or working in sedentary jobs, and this leaves little opportunity for physical activity. Many of the health crises of our time stem from this new norm. But we know there are clear health benefits of active transportation. The plan identifies many of these, including increased physical activity from active transportation and improving mental health and overall well-being. In addition to physical activity benefits, investments in active transportation can reduce vehicle trips and associated greenhouse gas emissions, resulting in improved air quality and respiratory health outcomes, which will let us all breathe a little bit easier. Best practices for walking and cycling infrastructure also help to separate these vulnerable road users from each other and from motor vehicles based on important factors like vehicle safety, speed, volumes to ensure improved road safety outcomes for everyone. And this aligns with the region's Vision Zero strategy that the City of Brampton is a part of. Every transit trip starts and ends with a walk or a bike ride. An important feature of the plan is how it links the development of active transportation infrastructure with the transit network in Brampton to improve walking and cycling access to transit. This is all about connectivity for the community. Using public transit has proven to be a key way for citizens to incorporate physical activity into their daily lives. So in closing, I'd like to say a big thank you to the City of Brampton for continuing to be a leader in building healthy environments through the Active Transportation Master Plan. Peel Public Health certainly looks forward to continuing to work with you to build complete health-promoting communities that support making the healthy choice the easy choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Our next delegation is from Mr. Kevin Montgomery, who is the co-chair of the Cycling Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize in advance. I'm getting over a cold, as you might tell. I mean, the presentation was great. I appreciate the presentation from staff because it allows me to shorten my presentation somewhat. But there are some main points that I'd like to highlight from this plan. One that was mentioned was the benefits, of course, of active transportation. But to give a little bit of context into the cost of what we're talking about here. So over the 22-year build out of the plan, the document gives an estimate of approximately $126 million. Now, for context, I can name 4 road widenings that are happening in Brampton that have a capital cost this year of $116 million alone. So the build out of an active transportation network is incredibly cost effective on top of the benefits that it returns that were previously stated. There was mention earlier of a priority maintenance network, and there's a passage from the report that I want to read, and it states, "To encourage, grow, and sustain active modes of transportation requires not only that the network be provided, but also that it be maintained throughout the year through all seasons. Appropriate maintenance practices applied to active transportation facilities can support user safety and comfort, facilitate and encourage active mobility during winter months, and increase the lifespan of infrastructure." To this point, I wanted to say that transportation does not end in winter. If we consider the city of Helsinki, a city which was recently showcased at the Rose Theatre for the ULI Toronto Urbanizing Suburbia, the Nordique Solution, Helsinki is located approximately at the same latitude as the Northwest Territories, yet maintains a 10% modal share year-round because the residents are enabled to do so. This is entirely achievable in the city of Brampton. The final point I want to address is regarding developing a walking and cycling culture. I would suggest that culture in itself is abstract and isn't necessarily a goal in itself. It's more of an effect of decisions and actions that enable participation, such as agreeing to include the implementation costs in the upcoming capital budget. After all, to quote the former Vancouver Chief Planner, Brent Toderian, "The truth about a city's aspirations isn't found in its vision, it's found in its budget." So, To that, I wanted to close by saying that meaningful change does not happen without investment and intent, and adopting this ATMP is an important step, and of course the funding must come next. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next delegation is Mr. David Lang, Bike Brampton.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, staff, and members of the public. I feel I need to start off by giving a little bit of an explanation as to my less than formal attire here today. Prior to the ATMP date being set for presentation, we had already made a commitment to participate in Share the Road Cycling Coalition's major fundraising event called Greg's Ride. And a number of us had decided that we were going to save carbon emissions and actually cycle from Brampton to Dundas, Ontario, participate in the ride, and then cycle back over 3 days. And so when we found out that the presentation was actually going to be done this afternoon, we did the logistics and felt that by getting up a little bit early, we could still make it back here in time and participate in this very important event. And it's fitting, kind of, that we're, as cyclists, participating in this presentation today. And I'd like to start off by complimenting staff and IBI for putting together what I consider to be a great plan. It is comprehensive, it is well thought out, it adequately considers the requirements of accessibility, vulnerable road user safety, including both pedestrians and cyclists. It addresses the maintenance required for all-season availability, as Kevin discussed, and will provide programs for cycling education, encouragement, and support. I can't stress enough the importance of properly designed safe infrastructure for encouraging cycling and walking, especially as it relates to changing transportation habits. And Councillor Fortini, we had a conversation just earlier, that you have members of your family that won't ride on the roads because they feel unsafe. This plan provides for interesting and comfortable routes, both on and off road, with infrastructure matched to speed and volume of motorized vehicles that will be sharing the road allowance. It provides amenities for recreational use and cycle tourism, such as wayfinding signage. And most importantly, to encourage people to get out of their cars and walk or bike, it provides a convenient and accessible network that will connect people to destinations, whether it be for recreation or for transportation. That includes connection to regional transit hubs, which is, again, first mile, last mile, as Dr. Hopkins mentioned. Now, earlier this summer, Council declared a climate emergency in recognition of the need for the city to reduce carbon emissions. In the city of Brampton, more than 60% of carbon emissions come from the transportation sector, and that was done from a recent energy audit that was performed for the city. And the vast majority of those, of that 60%, comes from the use of personal automobiles. So facing this emergency means that we need to change the way people move about this city. It has to be done, and has to be done soon. Encouraging more walking and cycling is a critical element to creating and supporting this change. The city has a significant opportunity to switch mode share, considering the large number of short-range trips that are currently being taken by car, according to the Transportation Tomorrow survey. Now, the $6.5 million in annual costs proposed in the plan sounds like a lot of money. Kevin gave you an excellent example as to why it's not, why there's a good business case. And it does represent a very small percentage of the overall road construction capital and maintenance budget. I would remind Council that until recently, the city has made only a modest investment in active transportation infrastructure. Most of the development has been on the backs of developers. The 2002 Master Pathways Plan, which was a plan that identified a community network as a backbone to the city cycling network, and not dissimilar to the one that's being proposed today in today's ATMP. And yet, while progress has been made, and I don't want to denigrate that in any way, but 18 years later, much of that network remains unbuilt. We can't afford another 18 years. We really can't. And we can't afford a business as usual scenario. So I really challenge this council, now is the time to take bold action. Now is the time to change the course of events. Now is the time to accept this ATMP, put money in the budget as Kevin suggested, And let's use the AT&P as the first step along that journey. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to members of committee. Councillor Santos.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, thank you for the presentation and for all the delegates who presented today. I haven't been shy about my support for active transportation and cycling in general. I love cycling, and I appreciate all the work that our members in the community, the cycling community, have done to help push this forward and push action forward to the city itself. I was so inspired by the Active Transportation Master Plan, which I read on Thursday night, that I decided on Friday I would see how long it would take for my son and I to bike to his school, and then for me to walk to the YMCA and then walk to City Hall. It takes me normally, when I drive my car to drop off my son at his school, about 5 minutes. It took us 5 minutes to get to his school on bike. It takes me normally 7 minutes to go from my house to City Hall. It took me about 15 minutes to walk. So it isn't that much time when you consider all the congestion that's happening. The other thing that inspired me was this. So a few weeks ago, the author of this book, Street Fight, Jeanette Sadik-Khan, came as a keynote speaker at the mayor's transportation meeting in Toronto. And she spoke and shared how the city of New York is transforming and prioritizing active transportation over cars. And part of the reason is, and perhaps my first question to staff will be, what does the research say when it comes to building more roads and congestion? Do we, when we build more roads, do we encourage more congestion in municipalities and cities? That's my first question.
It's rhetorical.
I
know it's rhetorical.
I'll speak on behalf of Public Works. From a transportation planning perspective, for sure. I mean, it's that pent-up congestion that we'll never get rid of congestion. We're just building for more people to occupy those roads and making that congestion.
So we're essentially, like, when we build more roads, and I appreciate the city of Brampton was built around the car. I totally get it, 100%. So was New York. And at one point, so was Amsterdam. But when we build more roads, it costs more money, but it also encourages more congestion. And to the point that Kevin made, when we build more active transportation, it costs significantly less. I believe the number is 7% or so of the actual capital roads budget. And we decrease congestion and increase and encourage a healthy lifestyle, which is all consistent where all future cities are going. And one could argue now with this plan, the city of Brampton is taking a lead that others can follow. We are possibly transforming a suburban, sprawling community that was designed on the car into a green-friendly, active transportation network that the rest of the world could probably follow. So I'm so obviously enthusiastic. The other thing that I was inspired by was yesterday. I was driving on Beauvert, which is currently under construction, to Fortino's to get food for my neighbors because I was going to have a last-minute party. And the northern lane, which goes east, it goes east on Beauvert, was closed to accommodate construction. The asphalt was already laid out. And you know who I saw? Probably illegal using that closed down road? Cyclists. There were dozens of cyclists in my one trip that I took to Fortino's who were using that closed portion of road on Beauvert, riding the road on their bikes. And I saw young people, I saw people with their groceries, I saw uncles, I saw women, I saw children safely using Beauvert and they were like totally riding past all the congested traffic on the way. So that was another inspiring moment. So I have a couple of other questions here. In terms of education and outreach, that is one of the biggest pieces in all of this as we start to shift the culture. I think we have to take a very proactive stance. So as we look into the implementation of this network, especially in the short term between 0 to 5 years, I noticed that in the outreach plan, there wasn't necessarily anything on door-to-door canvassing. And I think part of the education and proactive outreach will be going along those main routes, whether that's on Vauden or North Park or some of those other corridors where people live and reside, is going door to door. What I did notice in the outreach plan was an ambassador program, and I suggested to Nelson already, and I'll share it here, that what we could do is in the summer hire youth ambassadors, students, high school students over the summer to go into those major networks and educate those residents as to what to expect and why it's important on all the issues that the delegates shared today. So I'm going to put that down as a suggestion and see if that's possible for us to include. My other question is on education and outreach. It's important to do the education and outreach to developers, especially to developers around the mobility hubs, the transit hubs, urban centers. And so if we can make sure that as we're doing planning moving forward, especially in high-density locations, they know about the cycling infrastructure investments that the city is going to make. And perhaps, if it's possible, to look at what that means in relation to parking and parking requirements. So for example, and here's another question, do we have any parking requirements with respect to bike parking when it comes to developers of condos or high-intensity units, for example?
So through you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Santos, at this point in time, we don't have any standards contained within the comprehensive zoning bylaw requiring that bicycle parking be provided with certain types of developments. There have been some site-specific instances, though, where we've zoned for sites and have included some requirements, and that is something that staff strives to consider with development applications that are within our urban areas, urban styles, forms of development, where we typically do have landowners that are really progressively thinking and wanting to create an urban atmosphere, something that's quite well, marketable through to individuals looking to purchase as well. So this is something that we are striving for, but currently it's not contained
Is it
within that.
currently included perhaps in the sustainability assessment tool as part of the process if they have bike parking accommodation in their development application? Does it increase their score on the sustainability assessment tool? Do we know? So
through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know if that's really one of the scoring items that would impact the score. It obviously is a great thing for us to endeavor to work with our applicants on, but at this point in time, scoring-wise, I can't advise.
Okay, so I'm just going to put on the radar then and probably speak to the chair and vice chair and with staff to find out what we may be able to do in terms of standard or policy to include bike parking in some of these development applications. That would be fantastic. So I'll just put that on the radar for now, and we'll take that one back. And then the final question, so in lead up to today, one of our constituents, Councillor Vicente and I, named Laura Bowman, had asked a very specific question about the ATMP, and she had concerns about it not including enough for pedestrians. Could you perhaps share whether or not, in fact, that is true, and if so, why that is so?
Sure, I guess from a pedestrian perspective, I mean, we've done a reasonable job. Every road reconstruction project, we have, programs in place to deal with fix-it where there is gaps throughout the city. So from a pedestrian perspective, we do definitely need to enhance those programs right now, especially through urban centers, sort of increasing that public realm, improving that public realm. But for the most part, we have programs in place already through our Capital Works program to sort of address those needs. Cycling, however, is a different animal. I mean, like I said, 470 kilometers is a lot of kilometers, but in comparison to the pedestrian infrastructure in place, the road infrastructure in place, transit infrastructure in place is lacking. So I think the ATMP, this first ATMP, is really ramping up, sort of getting those programs in place, and that's why it's so cycling heavy, is that, I mean, there's an obvious gap there from a programming perspective, so that's why the focus is really cycling here.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions, but complete excitement and happy to receive the report as well as the delegations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Councillor Fortini.
Just looking at slide 15, and as David Lang said, this weekend I met with a bunch of residents on Central Parkway. We're putting up the bike lanes And I thought they were not gonna be too happy about it, but they were very happy that avoids the traffic kind of through all those townhouses and zero lot lines and all those there. And also the traffic less. What they were asking for, a lot of them, when we were had the meeting this Sunday, is like on slide 15 on the main roads. So a lot of them want to ride their bike, but they kind of, and my wife is one of them that is very scared. So usually if you have it on the boulevard, on slide 15, you could see it. Is this what we're gonna be doing on the main roads? That's my question. And a lot of residents raised that up this Sunday at the school there.
Right, so through the chair, part of the recommendation on sort of major arterial busy roadways is a network of multi-use paths, but also some protected bikeways, so with some physical protection between the cyclist and the roadway. So it may be a curb, it may be bollards or poured concrete, but we are generally proposing higher order cycling facilities along any of those,
Sorry, I just
those
want to
busy roadways.
mention, I think this is not the right one. Thank you, right there, you see? So on the main road, that's where.
So that's an example of McBean Drive, so this is an actual living example, and a lot of our arterial roads, we've taken that direction. Again, where we lacked in the past is maybe where those crossings were, but for the most part, high volumes, high speeds, large number of trucks, that's the focus, that's what we wanna do. In more residential context, you know, the Central Park Drive maybe, our residential, that's where we introduce sort of more on-street stuff, lower volumes, lower speed, and that's the idea, because having that, you know, repurposing the traffic lanes for a different purpose, it tends to have that traffic calming effect on vehicles too, creating a lower stress environment. So we sort of twofold, I mean, mitigates the speed as well as it provides facilities.
And the other concern that they had is when you come down, and a lot of them, like, not only the cyclists, also for people with wheelchairs and strollers, the depression on the road. So they could go from one to another, and I see that on page 27, so we're gonna be looking into stuff like that. And a lot of the residents, yes, they want to raise some concerns on that. They go in the parks and they can't get up with the bikes, they gotta stop.
Right.
On the trails, and then go back up, so maybe we could add more of those depressions at the end like that.
Right, so we had, one of the programs in the active transportation master plan is a fix-it program. We actually, through our budget, for this year's 2019 budget, includes a program in place that corrects a lot of those, provide proper crossings, provides access, curb depressions into parks.
So are we working on that now?
Yes, we are.
Because I've seen some curbs being done for this summer, and there's no depression, and they're brand new.
Right, so depending on the situation, we still recognize that if there are high volumes and there is a risk, then sight lines, so there is a number of parameters that we actually test each location, our traffic engineering group test each location to see if it's appropriate for a curb depression before we go out and depress the curb.
Because even though we have the master plan like for the cycling, but there's other trails in the parks, people still want to ride on it, and they gotta stop and lift up their bike, and I know around the Balmoral, it's brand new done, and we can leave the depression, so, you know, even if it's not that, every area off the trails should be done like that. It's easier for strollers, wheelchairs, bikes, it's for everyone.
Right, and through the chair, if you take a look at slide 16, you'll see a variety of different fix-it programs, and several of those fix-it programs are curb cut specific, including within the recreational trails fix-it program, there are specific items identified as part of that fix-it program to address curb cuts for recreational trails.
Thank you so much. Good job.
Thank you, Councilor Fortuna. Councilor Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so you know, I've had some personal experience with some of the newer bike lanes that have been put in on airport from Countryside to McBean, and I think it extends further from there. And so whereas we would usually drive to where we need to go, we usually take our bikes now, so it's really good. And it's encouraged our entire family to buy bikes and use them. A question is, so when you take a look at some of these types of bike lanes, so that's one type, you know, it's built into the side, it's separate from the road, it's very safe. Are there any other types of these lanes, like I see in cities, in the downtown areas, they'll have it on the road itself.
Yeah, for sure. So again, it all dependent on those road characteristics like volume, speed. So in the case of in a downtown environment and the use of cycle tracks, so our downtown reimagine projects, we always envision through the downtown it would be more closer to the road because of the land use types. When you have longer blocks with less driveways and interruptions, we can get away with the multi-use path, but you introduce those conflicts, it's not as efficient, and it creates more of a safety concern. So in those situations where you have more activity, more pedestrians, we want to sort of separate the pedestrians away from the cyclists, and we'll bring them closer to the road, but still have a protected facility. So whether it's bollards that are protecting the bicycle facility from live traffic, or a raised platform, so again, Boulevard Trail, just dedicated to cyclists only. Is that where you're?
Yeah, no, it's fine. So in terms of the maintenance of the different types of lanes, like in terms of cost, is there additional costs?
So through the chair, the direction from this active transportation master plan is we recognize that's a huge undertaking. So we've taken the approach that we would focus on that priority network. So that network that showed the loops and some east-west connections.
Mm-hmm.
And then even at that, we would take the opportunity over the course of the next few years to work with our public works people and assess sort of the implications of maintaining a network at that level first before making strong recommendations, because we understand there's going to be some cost implications,
Right.
and we need time to plan for those cost implications. So for sure, there's no hard recommendations, like we're not plowing it tomorrow. We're going to build this priority network
Right.
and then work that into sort of future budgets. So that's the recommendation from here is do some analysis with our public works people, see what it costs, see what implications, and then go forward, inform those budget cycles.
So, I think Kevin had mentioned Helsinki. I believe they ride their bikes all year round.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many people ride their bike now, roughly, in when we, when this project goes forward? Will we see an increase? Is that what the expectation is, that more and more we'll see more and more? And how much do you estimate we'll see?
Through the chair, I'm not sure of the exact percentage winter cycling in Brampton, but experiences in other municipalities typically can achieve about 25% of good weather riding will carry through to the winter. And that's in places where there's more concerted effort around maintenance and there's some consistency there. So the numbers are not negligible. There's certainly communities that they do achieve mode shares as high as 10 to 20% of cycling throughout the winter. So there's a lot of potential there with the right network and maintenance
So
practices.
just jumping back as well, I know for, I think it's the arterial roads that for the region and the city, we have, I forget the term that we use, where we have to keep it clean at all times. Will there be some criteria in place that there's certain areas or there's certain paths that must be cleaned?
Correct.
Is there discussion on that?
So you're referring to the minimum maintenance standards,
Minimum
provincial
maintenance, yes.
regulation?
Yes.
So the most recent update to those regulations included cycling infrastructure. So they provide us now that guidance, and that's spelled out here in the ATMP as well. So we're aiming to, the requirement is to hit those targets.
For the one main loop, we'll have maintain it so it's clear of snow?
That's the idea, yeah.
Sorry, what is, I'm not sure what that means.
So the minimum maintenance standards are similar to roads. We're required to meet a certain threshold. A certain amount of snow has to be cleared by a certain time, and I don't know the figures off the top of my head. I think it's within a day. So those would apply to this cycling infrastructure as
So
well.
we're going to keep them clean, though.
Yeah, that's the idea.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
That's the proposal.
Thank you, Councilor Dillon. Councilor Sente. Councilor Rose.
Thank you, through you, Chair. This is a really great master plan. I enjoyed looking over it, and it's exciting to see the direction that we're going to go. So just a few questions. I noticed that many of the plans and acts that were referenced were from 2017. Do we foresee any changes since we've had a new change in government, or are there going to be impacts based on that?
Are you through the chair, referencing specifically provincial plans?
Yeah,
or?
the plans and, some of the plans. And
Right, so there
acts
have
and-
been some recent changes. There's been some cancellation of funding programs, but I would say that the policy support is still there. And I would say that that's may vary in terms of the funding that's available at the provincial government, but that policy document is out there now and it's sort of set in place. So I don't see that overall provincial policy support. I think it's more around the funding that's available to municipalities.
And has the consideration of the funding that has been canceled, has that been added into the budget proposed to us today?
So, I guess one of the programs, so we were successful in receiving a program in 2016 that really paid for one project. It was project specific. Then we were also successful and we received funding for 1 year of a 5-year program. The subsequent years were canceled, so we did secure funding for that first year. And we do have 4 or 5 roadway projects that we invested that money or repurposed some of that money to basically fund it through that program. So.
Okay. So, looking at some of the missing sidewalks, that section of the report, and in many of the areas in Ward 7 in particular, much older area, many of the streets don't have sidewalks. And in considering, that every trip starts and ends with a walk to the bus stop, I know many residents in that area have requested some kind of traffic calming or sidewalks being put in, because it can be quite unsafe walking through the streets. So has there been any communication with, the traffic calming that the, public safety, public works department to see how we can make some of those accommodations? And, how is that kind of discussion happening?
So hopefully, the result of this is we've got a pot of money that can help with that. So the idea is, there's our missing sidewalk program is a capital works initiative. It definitely focuses on gaps on higher tier roads, arterial roads, and not necessarily the local roads. But one of the enhancement suggestions through this process would be to include those roads and provide that connectivity, especially on transit zones and that sort of thing. Raising that priority for a lot of these collector roads that are serving neighborhoods.
That's really great to hear, because it's often one of the deterrents for taking your bikes out, even teaching your kids how to ride a bike, because the streets can be quite busy, some of these interior roads, and then also people using those roads to bypass some of the traffic on the main roads. So inner street roads have become quite busy and concerning for residents. So if we're looking at ways to either put traffic calming or bike lanes even in those interior roads, or even put the sidewalks in, that'd be a really great help to the residents. I think it would encourage more bicycle usage. Also, if we look at the east side of Brampton, it's quite industrial and it's going to increase and develop. And when we look at the ultimate network, and compared to now, there's still some areas that might be difficult to get into those industrial areas. And if we want people to ride to work and feel safe on the roads, how much more consideration can we put to making sure that those areas are accessible in some of those industrial sites? Looking at in between Humber West, Airport Road, or even going south towards Steeles in the Clark Boulevard areas. I know it's 7.158, that's the map I'm looking at, that's the existing pedestrian network, but then also the facility types of, So if you look at some of these areas, there are some gaps that.
All right. Yeah, for sure. Norma raises a good point. There's also the regional network as well. So the original roads will include cycling infrastructure. And we feel, even this network, what we're finding is that it's at a very high level. There's going to be instances where we're not going to be able to produce maybe necessarily a link on one of the candidate roads. And so it's still pretty fluid as well. And if there is something that, an opportunity gets identified, whether it's and not addressed here, a hydro corridor or a utility corridor or something there, there's an opportunity down the road that we can add to this network as well, if there's another.
That's great to hear, because I think, wanting to, there will be more industrial areas and wanting to have people ride to
Right.
work. They want to have safe passage in through those trucks in those areas, so I don't know, I know signage and all those things will definitely help as well, but some consideration of that would be really great. And also, I know that Peace Arts is a really great group of people that discuss the Peel Safe and Active Routes to School. Have they had a chance to review this with anybody, or I know some of the groups that you couldn't collaborate with to come up with this master plan. I'm just wondering how some of the school piece and all those, have they given input and
City staff sit on Peace Arts, so I mean,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, so we helped inform the policy piece or the programming piece here. So Peace Arts is definitely included as one of the recommendations, that we maintain that relationship with the region as well as the other partners within Peace Arts. So.
That's really great. And so finally, how much do we foresee in savings, like the return on investment with implementing this plan through the long-term, like maintenance, with transit? How much do we see us saving if we make this investment now?
Through the chair. That's a hard thing to quantify at this
Is it?
point, especially when you're in sort of that ramp-up period. So in terms of mode share, once you sort of get over that tipping point and things really take off, is when it's a little bit easier to document those sort of cost comparables. But I'm trying to think of other municipalities that have similar examples. There's a lot of cost savings around, obviously, if you can quantify the health benefits, if you can quantify the pollution reductions. A lot of those health benefits are not necessarily things that cities pay for directly, but those factor into the return on investment overall for active transportation. There's direct benefits in terms of property costs. So there's studies that show that houses on the outside of trails, their property values actually grow, so there's some return on investment there. There's also, so for example, City of Toronto, when they were implementing their winter cycling network, they were looking at ways to reduce crowding on the subway system and on some of their transit routes. And so they were actually quantifying the benefit of the cycling network through getting people off of transit to make more space and attract more riders through that way. So there is some interesting sort of work you can do around return on investment, but it does take a while to collect that information. And there's certainly some information in the monitoring program to try to get some of those pieces of the puzzle.
That'd be really great to see, especially as we have to maintain our roads and we're, as we've talked about, expanding our roads, but then if we have more people cycling, maybe we're not having to repair potholes as often and do those types of things. So it'd be really great to see eventually how much we would return, how much we're saving by investing in the bike trails. But thank you so much. Thanks for answering my question.
Councilor Vicente.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just want to thank the members of our cycling advisory committee and those in the cycling community for being here today to lend your support to this. I'd also like to thank Dr. Hopkins for highlighting the health benefits that building a network like this can provide to all different residents. Wanted to just have staff comment on the economic benefits that building a network like this can provide to the city, because when employers are looking for places to build their business, or they're looking for talent, and they're looking for making sure that they are located in a place that has high livability scores, where folks can get to and from work with convenience and ease. Can you just comment on how that will benefit the city for decades to come?
Through the chair. So of course we are seeing trends, particularly among millennials and younger age groups, of employees looking for opportunities to be able to ditch the car and walk or ride to work, and that's one of the key factors in attracting and retaining that young workforce. So I think from that perspective, building out a network of walking and cycling facilities, particularly in the downtown core and employment areas, is really critical to attract and retain those types of employees. The other economic benefit that we sort of touched on but didn't emerge is also the tourism aspect. So cycling tourism is huge business and huge dollars. And as the network grows and develops, there is opportunity to attract tourists who spend money and buy and eat things. So that's another sort of aspect of the economic benefit that may not have emerged as much from the presentation.
Thank you. The laneways that are part of the road network are likely to be cleared by existing works teams that we already have under contract to the city. In terms of, we currently clean many of the trails that we have now to a standard, and I'm not sure if Kevin Montgomery wants to comment on that standard and how they are maintained today. But we are looking at providing a bare pavement standard here on all of these trails. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so are we looking for that work to be done by a new team of contractors, or is that going to be mainly done by city crews and teams? What's the plan there?
So again, like I said, a lot of the recommendations here are at very high level to work with it. So identify that priority network, work with our public works people, and measure those implications first. I mean, it could be very well, the same equipment can still do this work. We don't know yet. I mean, depending on the type of facility, it might even be a different type of equipment required or a different process to maintain these. So through a best practices exercise, working with our public work people, we're really going to identify, the specifics on how we maintain it, who maintains it, and what resources we use to maintain it.
Is staff aware at all of any potential income or funding streams from the federal government? Because I know that they are promoting greener lifestyles and green economy. Might there be streams through either carbon tax or other gas tax sources to help pay for the maintenance of these trails?
I'm not aware, but we can definitely look into it. We will look into it for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Santos.
Thank you through you, Chair. I wanted to add, because I think I forgot in the beginning, that having the active transportation master plan also is a signal that Brampton is starting to look at transportation in a different way and prioritizing things in a different way. With all due respect and appreciation to Councillor Williams' question about an ROI regarding cycling infrastructure, have we ever done an ROI on road infrastructure? On expanding our roads, for example? I don't think so. What I will say in digging in some of the research is that Williams Parkway expansion to 6 lanes is going to cost somewhere between $120 to $130 million or more, just for a 6-lane expansion highway. And an investment of the entire cycling infrastructure network being proposed in this plan is going to cost $126 million. So, if we're going to talk about ROIs and research regarding cycling infrastructure, active transportation, I think what we're doing with this plan is saying that we want to share the road, that our employers and business investors and examples around the world are moving in this direction. And if the city of Brampton wants to take a leading role and start to fundamentally address congestion issues which are impacting the productivity of employees, then this is the direction that we need to go. So I just wanted to add that because I have never heard anyone say what's the ROI on, expanding roads to 6 lanes, for example. Thanks.
Councillor Fortini.
This is just a quick question. It might be a dumb question, but I have to ask it because a resident asked yesterday. So when we do all these bike lanes, we have these e-bikes. Are they allowed to go on these bike lanes on the paths, or only the ones there? Because he said he's got one and he's been going around, and I don't know.
So-
There was electric bikes.
Sure. So through the chair, our current traffic bylaw allows them on road facilities,
Right.
but not on multi-use paths or recreation paths. So
So-
through the parklands or those paths that are in the boulevard, they're not currently permitted.
So we have to put signs up because how would they know?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he's got, that's the law, and that's how we interpret, I mean, we have, I'm not sure if there's enforcement happening now, but we'll definitely look at proper signage.
Yeah, he mentioned it because it was quite a few people actually had those bikes and they go to work or whatever, go for a ride, but when the happening, they go through the parks to get a shortcut. And they said, I wonder if we know we're allowed on the road, what about these paths,
Right.
these type of paths or through the park? So I don't know, so, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Fatini. Members of the committee now, as I see there's no further questions or comments. I have Councilor Santos has moved receipt of the delegations, item 6.1 and staff report 7.1. All in favor? Can I get your hands up? Hands up. Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is a staff report item, regarding, because of correspondence, you pulled it out, Councillor Bowman? 7.3, yep.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'd just be happy to add the correspondence and move the receipt.
Okay, so Councillor Bowman has moved staff report and receipt and correspondence. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item again, Councillor Bowman, 7.5.
Yep, we'll add 13.2 to the correspondence and move the staff report.
So noted. Councillor Bowman has moved receipt and correspondence. All in favor? 1, 2, 3. We've missed quorum. Councillor Vicente?
Councillor Vicente,
Vicente? Gerpre? Can you, sorry.
we've
Can
lost
you-
quorum. So get the names of them. So, Mr. Chair, we now have quorum. The two members that were not present will not be shown when we failed for quorum.
Okay. Okay, so now we go back to item 7.5. Motion moved by Councillor Bowman to receive and add correspondence. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Our heritage minutes were moved into consent. We have no referred matters, deferred matters. We go to Councillor question period. Any questions? No. Now we go to yes, Councillor Bowman.
Sorry.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just jumped in there before the bell. With the transportation master plan, active transportation master plan now in place, is there any thought going to be given for bike stations such as they have in Toronto for rental of bikes and things like that across the city anywhere?
Through the chair, this isn't something that we're aware of as going forward. I mean, of course, it sets the stage for that broader conversation and is something we can look at in the future, but I'm not aware of that as one of the elements that's being proposed at this time.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowman. As no further questions, now we go to public question period. Are there any members of the public who would like to pose any questions? No. Okay. Our next meeting is October 7th. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Williams. All in favor? Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day.